This episode is in partnership with Fantasy WSL, the biggest fantasy game in women's football. Fantasy WSL is where you can manage your own squad and earn points for real-life performances. Rise through the ranks in leagues against your friends and fellow managers. Keep up to date with the WSL results and fixtures with game week and live match notifications. Head to fantasywsl.net or download the app from your app store and get started today. Hello everybody and welcome to Decoding the WSL, the podcast dedicated to the stats and facts in the WSL. On today's show we're going to be having a look back at game week 14, a week where all 6 home teams won, and there were big wins for teams like Leicester and Arsenal that we're going to dig into today. I'm your host, Sam Stattorino.
And I'm Izzy Duddy.
Yes, hello listener, welcome to Decoding the WSL. I'm your host, Sam Stattorino, and as you may have heard there, we have a guest on this week, a guest that I'm very happy to have on this week. Someone from Fantasy WSL who we're obviously partnering with, so it's really great to have you on. We have Izzy Duddy, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Sam?
Yeah, good, thank you. Izzy is the Director of Strategy, I believe is your official title at Fantasy WSL. Do you want to give the listeners a little, before we get into the actual WSL stuff, give them a little review of what you do?
Yeah, so my title's Director of Strategy, but at this point, it's more what don't I do? It's a very hands-on team. But yeah, I help run the day-to-day at Fantasy WSL. So everything from, price changes to trying to talk to people, trying to get partners, media partners involved, you name it, I probably help out doing it. So yeah, it's the dream job, really.
It does sound like quite good fun. I'm quite jealous. We're going to get into a proper deep dive on Fantasy WSL later on. But to start with, we're going to have a look at the weekend's games. So let's have a look back at a weekend where all 6 home teams won in the WSL. It was a terrible game for Crystal Palace in the first game of the day, as Elizabeth Turland scored twice in a 3-1 win for Man United. Arsenal painted the town red, North London to be specific, as they brushed Spurs aside with a 5-star display. It was not a happy return to Kingsmeadow for Mariam Yelda, as her new side Everton were defeated late on by a Lauren James strike from distance. Leicester scored 3 goals in a WSL game for the first time in a year as they beat Aston Villa, jumping the villains in the table in the process. West Ham certainly had a game plan on Sunday, just 33% possession, but they still came out with a 3-1 win at home to a Brighton side that hasn't won a WSL game since mid-November. And the weekend finished with Bunny Shaw back to doing what she does best, which is great to see. She scored twice in City's 4-0 win at home to Liverpool, but there is only one place to kick off today's pod, and that is the North London Derby. Yes, the North London Derby was on Sunday. It finished Arsenal 5, Spurs 0, and this is how the game went. Kyra Cooney's cross met Russo but deflected into the Spurs net off a helpless Claire Hunt. Mariona made it 2, slotting home after her first shot was blocked. Then Claire Hunt's day got even worse. Another unfortunate deflection off Marnham's shot made it 3-0 early in the second half. The game got very stretched, which only went in Arsenal's favour, Leslie Russo making it 4 from a counter-attack. And then at 4-0 down, I think the last thing Spurs would want to see is some attacking talent coming off the bench. But with 30 minutes to go, that's what Arsenal did when they subbed Chloe Kelly on. Emily Fox finished off the scoring in the 90th minute with her first WSL goal, scoring a really good goal from about 25 metres out. Now, people that listen to the show regularly will know that I think I'm pretty good at covering all bases, and I'm not very biased, I like to think, but I am an Arsenal fan. So I want to put that out now before I get into the North London Derby. Izzy, I think you should tell people who you support.
I don't know if I'm allowed to. I can't bias the game. I'll say I have a season ticket at the Emirates, but that's not to say anything. I just love women's football.
We'll take that. I don't have a season ticket at the Emirates, but maybe between us, it averages out.
Exactly.
So does that mean you went to the game this week?
I actually couldn't make this week's game, largely because I was watching all the other ones and trekking halfway across London to the Emirates isn't conducive to all the other kickoff times. But I did watch it back on the TV afterwards, and yeah, I mean, we expected Arsenal to win, but it was pretty shocking from Spurs.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I don't think it was any surprise that Arsenal won. I think a lot has been made of the fact that the difference between Arsenal and Spurs is quite large. I think the difference between sort of the top 3 or 4 and the rest of the league is quite big anyway. I saw a piece on, I think it was on X, a couple of weeks ago about sort of the bookies' favourite has won something like 93% of the time the WSL this season, which doesn't make the game overly interesting, although hopefully that does change. But I think, yeah, like you say, we knew Arsenal would win, but probably didn't know quite how convincingly Arsenal would win. And I think, despite the fact that we won 5-0 in the end, I think the main story that came out of it, and probably the biggest cheer of the day, was when Chloe Kelly was subbed on.
Yeah, that
So
was
she was on
crazy.
with 61 minutes, about half an hour to go. And she put in a really good performance. She actually created 4 chances in the half an hour that she was on the pitch. She played 169 minutes at Man City this season and only created 2, which shows that how I guess how free flowing she's feeling at Arsenal. Maybe it's to do with the opposition as well, but she played a decent amount at Man City. Do you think this transfer to Arsenal could be almost the second coming of her this season?
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to toot my own horn here because I called this at the beginning of the transfer season. When all the rumours were going, I said the only place she should be going is Arsenal because I think that spot was potentially up for grabs. I don't think they needed another winger, but I certainly think they could have used a bit of backup. And it felt like she was the perfect choice. So when there was that whole deadline day drama, I was thinking, oh God, is she going to go to United? Blah, blah, blah. She came to Arsenal, and I think it's psychological, isn't it? I think she's always had it in her, but she's clearly been having some issues at City, and she's just been feeling a bit boxed in or whatever it is. And I've been at the Emirates when Miedema's come back on the pitch after she left for City, or Jordan Nobbs after she left for Villa, and like the sort of reception that you get is pretty massive. So I'm sure that just encouraged her, and yeah, hopefully we see a lot more of her.
Yeah, I think she's a player that, when she's at her best, is one of the most creative players in the league. Certainly last season, her and Lauren Hemp by the side at Man City were doing bits. I think she's going to be someone that probably will maybe not get to a complete prime, but will thrive at Arsenal, especially with, obviously, Caitlin Ford's not 100% fit at the moment. Beth Mead, we think, has some sort of knock. She's pulled out of the England squad. Chloe Kelly has taken her place, got her call up. I unfortunately can't toot my own horn and say, oh, she was always going to go to Arsenal, because I said that I think the best place for her to go would be Liverpool, because it's obviously not that far from Manchester. I assume she lives near Manchester. They've got Sophie Roman Haug, who is an elite header of the ball, and she is an elite crosser of the ball. Liverpool sometimes end up playing like a 4-3-3 formation. They tend to set up with like a 5 at the back, but later in the game they often go to a 4 at the back. And I thought, in that formation, she can be on the wing, whipping in crosses to the best header in the league. We already know that Matt Beard loves getting a loan signing in because he doesn't have the money to buy anyone. I thought, it just makes sense. And then, yeah, lo and behold, no, she had that little video with Katie McCabe, and it was all happy days.
That was a nice touch, to be fair. But yeah, no, she's yeah, I guess she's returned home. But no, I think it will be a good place for her, and who knows what will happen after the summer. But I think for now, it's where she needs to be.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of rumours that will circulate, because what is she going to do in the summer? Her contract's up. It doesn't look like Man City or Gareth Taylor, whoever it is, whether it's Kelly doesn't want to play there, whatever it is, no one really knows. But it doesn't look like she's going to be staying at City. Is she going to go the other side of Manchester? Is she going to go move to Arsenal? It sounds like she's commuting at the moment down to London, or staying there a few nights a week and then going back up to Manchester at other points. I don't know exactly.
You did a house swap with Viv Miedema.
Maybe that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, how's it with Visionaries, surely?
Yeah, exactly.
He's gone the other way. Yeah, poor Laura Visionaries. She didn't even get a start the weekend, even though they rotated their right back. But we'll come to Man City in a bit. I won't dwell too much on that Arsenal performance, likely because I don't want to get called too biased. I don't want to get too much into Spurs either, because I do think Spurs have a lot of really good players. I do think Robert Villaham's a very good manager. I don't think this was their day. I don't think they're in a very good patch of form at the moment. And I like to keep the pod positive, so we're not going to dwell on the negatives too much. But I do want to move on to a different match this weekend, another big home win, which was for Leicester. They won 3-0 at home to Villa. Janice came in at the double with what I think was probably the goal of the weekend, that volley from the edge of the
I
box.
have to agree, actually. I mean, Emily Fox, what a shot, but I think Cayman has to have it. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I agree. I think Lauren James is a close third behind them as well. We'll come to that game in a bit as well. But yeah, from Janice came in, that's outstanding. Julie Thibault, her header made it 3 and sort of rounded off that victory. And it was a really big victory in terms of the table overall, because Leicester were in 11th, Villa were in 10th. They've now swapped places. And obviously they're not too close, but they're not a million miles ahead of Crystal Palace in that relegation spot. And it is, yeah, like I said, the first time Leicester have scored 3 or more goals in a WSL game, actually since the 18th of February 2024, when they won 5-2 against Bristol City. Well, a year and a day as we record, because it is Wednesday, 19th at the moment in the evening. Leicester will obviously be really happy with this, but it is quite a tough loss for Villa. They're now 11th. They are only 4 points, albeit with a 14 goal difference, better goal difference. Clear relegation. Do you think relegation is still a possibility for them? Do you think Palace are too far away? There's obviously 8 games to go still, so it's half a point a game difference. Do you think Palace
Yeah,
can make it out, or
I
do you
think
think they're gone?
Palace have they have a quite difficult run of fixtures in comparison to Villa. Um, I think Villa could probably hold on. I think Palace are going to struggle. I think they've still got Arsenal, Chelsea, and City, so that's tough. I think it's a shame because personally, I haven't been convinced at all by Villa this season. Like, I don't know what's happened, but maybe it's sort of new manager, new, I don't know, but nothing's clicking in it. They've just fallen completely. Whereas Palace have had a struggle, but I feel like quite a lot of the time they've put up a fight. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think barring an upset, it looks like Palace are going down, which is again a shame. I think they were a great addition to the WSL this season, but yeah, I don't know what's going on at Villa.
I thought Villa's been a bit of a weird one, even when Robert Power's in charge, because they put in quite a lot of good performances. You think actually both of their games against Chelsea, I know one of them was with their new manager, but they put in quite a lot of good performances. I think they've won quite a few games on XG this season that they've actually ended up drawing or losing. It just seems to be that, yeah, they're not getting the results for some reason that no one seems to know.
Yeah, and
Um,
they have great players. Like it's not down to a lack of talent at all. So
Yeah, I think Lucy Parker's obviously been called up to the England squad as well now. I think in place of Lotta Moy, she's been really good this season, as is Anna Patton at centre back. In that sort of partnership, Jordan Nobbs has been a good addition. Rachel Daly's been scoring goals. I think Kirsty Hansen's been really good this season. I think she's probably been one of the most underrated players in the WSL this season. She was from I've seen quite a few people say online that she was their best player this weekend. She didn't get me as many points as I wished in my fantasy, but never mind. But yeah, I think Villa are just underperforming. I think they will sort of revert back to the mean as such at some point, where their performances deserve more points than they've got. They're just not getting them. But like I say, they've played Chelsea twice, which, unless you're Leicester, is a loss. um, and for every other team anyway. So they've got that out of the way, and I think Villa can put up a fight against even Arsenal's and Man Cities and people like that. They've got a lot of experienced players in there. But yeah, we'll move on to Palace now, because they lost away at Man United 3-1. It's another 3 points to Man United. And yeah, as we discussed, it's not looking good for Palace. I didn't think their changes recently have really had much of a positive impact. I think they've changed their goalkeeper recently, but Shea Inez wasn't looking. She was. I think she wasn't terrible, but she wasn't good enough. So they've replaced her with, I think it's Majashari, which was a summer signing who's sort of been waiting for a chance. I don't think she looks any better. If anything, I'd probably say she's looking worse at the moment. And she was at fault in all three of the Manchester United goals. Not purely her fault, but she did have a fault in them. I think the new centre back, Swaby, who's I think it's her sister who plays at Leicester.
Yeah.
She doesn't look very confident. That might come in time. She's moving to London, things like that. But hopefully she looks a bit more confident as the season goes on. But yeah, playing with that Palace side, I think if I was a player that had that was one of the better players on that side, I'd be looking around like, come on, bring your levels up. I wanted to give a shout out to Lily Woodham because I think she was someone on the day that was really trying to hold standards. I think after you can see it on the YouTube highlights. I remember when I was watching that, I clocked her reaction after the first goal, which was the sort of the clearance that didn't get cleared properly. They played through, the centre backs didn't really mark very well. Turland had quite an easy turn shot. And Lily Woodham was just sort of looking around like, dropped her head like, oh my God, I cannot believe that this is what has just happened. Good as Elizabeth Turland is, I think Palace could probably have done a bit more. I think it's, from a league perspective, I think it's disappointing to see another team, same as Bristol last year, come up and go straight back down. I think it shows a bit more that there's, or shows even more that there's a gulf between the WSL, the top teams in the WSL, the bottom teams in the WSL, and then the championship teams.
Definitely. I think, yeah. Again, Crystal Palace, like before the winter break, I think they had a real spark and they had a really good run, sort of beginning of the season. Their goalie was amazing, at least from a fantasy perspective. I mean, that was just like week after week, points here, there, and everywhere. But yeah, I guess they've had, well, their captain's out now with an ACL, Amy Everett, isn't she? Um, my only hope is that Elise Hughes is back now from her ACL injury. I was so excited when they got promoted. She was going to come to WSL, and then she obviously got the awful 3-letter injury, but she seems to be back. And yeah, hopefully she can kind of bring some sort of spark back to the team. She's obviously a really important player for them, so maybe that will kind of boost spirits a little bit.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to go for that. At least Hughes will really help out with this. The kind of like the heavy metal football, as Jurgen Klopp used to coin it at Liverpool men's side, where it doesn't matter how many you score, we're just going to score more than you. Because defensively they don't look great, but going forward they have scored a decent amount of goals, and they obviously scored loads of goals last year in the Championship.
Just keep working them in and it will come. And maybe, you never know. If Villa sort of fail to capitalise against a few teams, it could pay off.
Yeah, and they're only 4 points behind, so it's one of those, within 2 or 3 weeks you could feasibly see that change. I think that sort of bottom 8, there's a lot of teams beating each other.
So. Yeah, I think this season it's a lot more equal once you get out the top 4 than it was last season, which I guess is good in a sense that, that gulf's getting smaller. It's just the gap between the sort of top teams and then the rest of the league that might need a bit of work. But I think it's a lot more interesting, at least in terms of sort of table positioning.
Yeah, completely agree. Talking of teams that are in that bottom 8, I'm going to move on to Everton this weekend because they went in the lead against Chelsea, which when I wasn't watching it live, but when I saw the notification come through, I was like, oh, I'm interested. Kelly Gago once again getting on the score sheet, putting them ahead. When I saw the goal back, I was really surprised at Hannah Hampton in it because she didn't even try to save it.
Kind of looked at it and she was like, ooh.
She was in the right position and sort of watched the shot come in, and then I think she must have thought it was going over or wide or something.
Yeah, or crossing. I don't know. Yeah,
but it went in. Kelly Gago won't mind. But Mara Ramirez seemed to be on a bit of a mission, especially in the second half. She made it 1-1, almost got a second. But Lauren James won the game in the 93rd minute, which was a goal that got a bit of talk online. I'm in the camp of I think this was a foul in the build-up. Marimielda went up for a header. Lauren James sort of stood her ground, crouched, which meant Marimielda kind of went over her, which is quite dangerous. It is, as far as I'm aware, it's illegal. I think it was highlighted a few years ago when Harry Kane sort of became famous for doing it quite a lot. It's the sort of thing that isn't necessarily malicious. I don't think Lauren James was trying to hurt anyone, but I do think it was quite dangerous because then Marimielda obviously falls, probably at least on her shoulder, if not on her head. It's really hard to police, is the other thing that I wanted to say about it, because especially when you haven't got VAR, you can't pick up on these sort of fouls, and if the ref doesn't see it, doesn't see the fact that Lauren James is crouched underneath, you're not really looking out for it. It's not like a big sliding tackle, you know something's coming. But yeah, I don't think this was supposed to be a goal. What about you?
Look, at Fantasy WSL, we live by the stats, and what what the ref says and what the game stats say goes. And unfortunately, it is the way it is. I mean, it was a great goal. So it was nice to have Lauren James back doing her Lauren James stuff. But yeah, I think potentially that was maybe a bit unfair. And I watched the game live, and I thought Everton were great. I thought they were really putting up a fight. I mean, that first goal was amazing, but even when they got the ball sort of back from Chelsea, they really pushed on the counter attack. And I think I was really rooting for them. Actually, it was completely from a like genuinely impartial perspective. It was a real case of sort of the underdog, and you really wanted them to do well. And it did look like they might get another one in even after that Myra Ramirez goal. But yeah, unfortunately, Lauren James just had to do what she does best.
It was a bit of a crazy end to the game as well. I think you could see the tempers were flaring as well on the emotions were going. Courtney Brosnan was absolutely fuming after the goal.
Yellow cards were flying. I was trying to keep up. I was like trying to live tweet everything, being like, "Oh my god, yeah, it's too much." I thought I could sit back and relax for a few minutes.
Oh no, you can never sit back and relax, especially when there's so many games going on at the same time on a Sunday. But yeah, no, I felt bad for Everton. They're in a really good spell at the moment. I think you can tell that obviously their takeover completed a month or two ago now. Um, They have invested in the men's side and in the women's side. I think you can see they've brought players in. They have, I think there's an element of they've seen what Man United have done and thought, we don't want to do that. So they've actually, supported Brian Sorensen, who I think now that he's got a few tools at his disposal, he's actually got a bit of a squad to select.
Yeah, and I think they genuinely had one of the best transfer windows this January of all the teams.
Oh, yeah. Well, these are probably the two teams that had the best because it's hard to say that someone brings in Naomi Girma for $1 million and Kira Walsh in the same transfer window, and they're the second best transfer window in the league. But it actually probably is the second most impactful because Chelsea are probably going to win the league anyway, realistically.
Yeah, exactly.
It will help them in the Champions League, obviously, but Everton, I think this sort of thing with Hayley Ladd and people like that as well, I think it is the difference between them being in this relegation fight and actually being a comfortable mid-table side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think they're investing for next season, so I'm excited to see what comes of them because yeah, it would be good to see them do well. I think they probably deserve it. They're really working their way up there.
Yeah, yeah, agree. The only thing I would like to see from Everton still is them to give their women somewhere else to play.
Yeah,
Maybe this new stadium because is it Walton Hall? It's called.
yeah.
I always think it looks really budget for a top level side.
I know
Um,
it does look a bit like it's sort of in a playground somewhere, doesn't it?
yeah, it looks like the pitch I used to play my sort of after work five-a-side league on.
Yeah.
Um, you can do better, Everton. You can. We'll move on to just the other two games this weekend quickly. So West Ham 3-1 Brighton, a big game and a big win for West Ham, who are on a bit of a surge up the table. I actually picked West Ham for relegation at the start of the season. I think I said about November time that I still thought they might go down, and I am now eating my words because Rianne Skinner is working her magic. She's very good at making this team more than the sum of its parts. She doesn't have a big budget, but she really gets the best out of some of these players, especially Vivasay. I think she's probably one of their best players, one of their better players. Katrina Gorry, I think, is their best, but Vivasay has been really good the last few games. She's in a real. You can see how confident she is. She's not only she won a penalty, she got an assist from the corner, obviously scored the penalty as well, and just looked like she was having fun with all the flicks and
Yeah,
tricks and stuff like that.
I'm a big fan of her. I think she's great. I think I'm like you. I probably would have said they end up in bottom two, but I've got quite a soft spot for them this this season. I think you like again you can see them working. They're working hard. They're getting results. I do think Brighton were just completely off it on Sunday. I think they really weren't looking their best at all. Which they set quite high standards for themselves at the beginning of the season, and they're consistently not meeting them anymore. So yeah, I think it's not surprising they won, but it's nice to see them sort of get a good few goals in.
Yeah, because they had such a good start, Brighton, to the season. That I think was more than they expected, more than Dario Vidicic would have expected, more than I guess the upper management could have hoped when they brought in the new manager, and obviously players like Frank Kirby and Kankovic and things like that in the summer. But yeah, it's not been a great 2025 so far. But I think that their 2024, the end of 2024, was so good for them that they could probably lose every game now and stay up because
Yeah. Yeah, I think, they're just going through a bad spell. Hopefully they'll find their form again because they were great to watch as well when they were sort of in their prime towards the end of last year. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the upcoming fixtures are, but hopefully they've got a few ones that can give them a bit more room to get creative.
yeah, I can't remember exactly the teams they're playing, but I remember specifically not putting any Brighton players in my fantasy team because I thought they had hard fixtures, so they can't be that good at fixtures.
Oh dear.
But talking of nightmare fixtures, I think for Liverpool, they never really like playing Man City. It is 4-0. It was 4-0 this weekend. City in this game were just too good. And once again, Bunny Shaw getting 2 goals against Liverpool. She scored both goals when they won 2-1 at Liverpool earlier this season. She got 2 goals in this game. Jill Ward got the third one. And then Gracie Pryor, who I think will admit herself that was not a shot. It was definitely a cross that she just didn't quite catch right. We've all done it.
Well, that's got to be a contender for goal of the weekend, though. I mean, that it shook even Gracie Pryor. It was that good.
Someone I felt a bit bad for, and I didn't actually clock. It didn't register in my brain until after the game when I was looking at the stats and looking at the team sheets and stuff, which was Laura Wienreuter. She's obviously moved from Arsenal because she's not getting any minutes to City, which hopefully can give her a bit more pitch time. They've got Kirsten Kasperite out, their normal right back. You would think, oh, that's why you've brought in your backup right back, surely. And then they give Gracie Pryor a start, and she does really well. She does well throughout the game, and obviously scores towards the end. Um, how how disappointing do you think that would be if you're Laura Wienreuter and you've moved halfway up the country to go and try and get in a different team, and then the 18-year-old that you're competing against gets played ahead of you? How disappointing is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I can only assume or hope that, it's to do with the fact that maybe she's new to the team. She hasn't been training with them for as long. It's more of a sort of chemistry thing than anything. And perhaps Gareth Taylor just thought, you know what, this is a sort of game that we need to win against a tough team. But, Laura Wienreuter's great. And when she was playing for Arsenal, obviously she's had been really unlucky with her injury and stuff, but when she's on good form, she's on really good form, and she can attack and she can go down the wing, which is what City do really well. So I don't necessarily understand, why she wasn't played, but maybe she had a niggle, maybe she had a tummy ache. I don't know. But yeah, hopefully she'll be getting some more game time, because it seems like it was quite a difficult decision for her to leave Arsenal. So hopefully it pays off for her.
Yeah, yeah, I quite like her as a player, and I think, like you say, when she's good, she's really good. She's probably, if she was going to go somewhere, obviously she's really good friends with Beth Mead and Viv Miedemar, so she's got half of that couple anyway up in Man City. That I don't know if she's living with Miedemar or something at the moment, but she'll certainly have a friend up there. But yeah, maybe when it gets to Champions League games and things like that, there might be a few more opportunities for her. We shouldn't probably go too much further without talking about Bunny Shaw in this game. If you're the sort of person that listens to a lot of women's football podcasts, you're probably going to be sick of hearing this kind of chat, because it is just something that everyone is really talking about at the moment. Bunny Shaw is obviously, I think, the best player in the league. She's obviously the best goal scorer. I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. But obviously, against was it against Arsenal in the cup that she pulled out due to the sort of racist abuse that she'd had, and she felt the need to withdraw herself from the game. I think she's a really good character, and quite a strong character, and I think for her to feel the need to remove herself from a game, it must have been really getting to her, and it's probably the sort of thing that's really hard to come back from as well mentally. But it seems like she just does what she does and has scored two really good goals, and goals where she seemed to kind of dominate the defence. I think I can't remember if it was the first or the second one, she ended up being marked by Taylor Hines, who, poor Taylor Hines, was doing as much as she could. But Bunny Shaw, her obviously national teammate, was just a dominator in that space, and didn't let Liverpool defence get anywhere near her to score both of those goals. How great is it to see Bunny Shaw back?
It honestly, it's amazing, because what she's been facing is just atrocious, and you could see how much it meant to her as well when she kind of put her fist up, and sort of clearly, for her this is still quite raw, but I can imagine that being able to just get back to what you do and what you love, and do so well, must be a real probably relief for her, I'd say, especially if, like you say, she's sort of had to pull out of games to sort of deal with this, horrible abuse. I think it is great. It's just, and it's so great for us as well, just to see her back doing that, because it's just so much fun to watch, and she's just great, and she's clearly a great character, she's clearly a strong character, and I love watching her play, I really do.
Yeah, she's such a good player. She's really entertaining to watch. She's definitely in that sort of elite bracket of striker. She's definitely got a shout for being one of, if not the best player in the world. But another player who at the moment is playing like the best player in the world is Mary Fowler. I can't take the credit for this stat, unfortunately, because I did steal it from the Barclays WSL page, which was that she is the first person to get two or more goal involvements in 4 consecutive WSL games. So that is either a goal and assist, 2 goals, or 2 assists or more in 4 consecutive games. She is really hitting the ground running. She has been a really important player, I think, for Man City. Obviously, they've missed Viv Miedemar a little bit recently with sort of injury niggles. They've obviously missed Bunny Shaw, and now, they haven't needed to worry. Even though they've got 2 of the best strikers in the world out injured, they've just got another one pops up. Young Mary Fowler. She's only 21, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I'm such a big Mary Fowler fan, actually, and I also stole that stat, but from Sky Sports, I think, and I've been parroting it around like non-stop since, because I just think it's incredible. And what I like most about Mary Fowler is, and again, this is not me tooting my own horn. This is just, I think, probably an indication that I should do more with my life other than just like read about women's football players. But last season at City, she was so under the radar, and I always remember thinking, particularly after like the World Cup and everything, I always remember thinking, why is she at City if she's not really, getting her time to shine? Because for Australia, she was always sort of in the last few years one of the big players, and a big name, and it just seemed to me a bit like at City she was kind of living in the sort of, I guess, living in the shadows of like Lauren Hemp and all that. Well, obviously with Hemp now out and she's had a chance to shine and she's absolutely taken it. And I'm killing myself because for some reason I'm staying loyal to Viv Miedemar. And I was going to put Fowler in my fantasy team and I chose Viv instead. And look where that got me. 2 points.
I had Viv near the start of the season. I think I left her out in the first game, the one away at Arsenal, and then after that I put her in for a bit. But I've put Mary Fowler in this week, as in this week just gone for the first time this season.
Yeah, I think Mary's coming into my team.
Yeah, she always just seemed like not quite the best option because Bunny Shaw was also a forward in the same position, and Alessia Rousseau was in really good form, and there were other good options in the forward position. But yeah, I took full advantage of probably not the best time to play it, but out of desperation, I played my clean slate this week and got her in. But we'll get into actual Fantasy WSL stuff in a moment. That was, well, a little roundup of what happened this weekend. We're going to take a little break and then we'll get on to the Fantasy WSL bits. Welcome back, listener. It is Decoding the WSL with me, Sam Stattorino. We've got Izzy Duddy with me today. Direct strategy and, well, it sounds like absolute jack of all trades at Fantasy WSL, and that is exactly what we're going to be talking about in this second half today. We are going to get into sort of more of a deep dive around Fantasy WSL and almost a little interview with Izzy. But first, I do want to just talk about how we got on this week. I was really happy with mine this week. I actually compared myself last week or the week before, I can't remember when it was, to Brighton because I did really well in the first half of the season, much better than I expected, much higher up the tables than I thought. And then in 2025, I've been bang average. I've fallen down the table every week. But this week, I bucked the trend. I did well. I got 75 points, helped by 46 points from my 3 Man City players, which were Bunny Shaw, Jill Roord, and Mary Fowler. Obviously, Mary Fowler getting, I think, 2 assists. Jill Roord scored and Bunny Shaw scored twice. So I'm almost back in the top 100 now. I'm up to 112th, which if I finish in the top 200, I'll be happy. If I finish in the top 100, I won't shut up about it. So I'm very happy at the moment. And yeah, we'll live off this for a while. How did you get on this week?
On reflection, I didn't do badly at all. I think I held myself to a high standard this week because I was expecting to do very well, but between a few maybe poor choices and definitely a poor captain choice, because I was in the Toon camp this week thinking, of course Toon's going to get another hat trick. Well, she didn't. So I think I brought in Toon, but I got 64 points, which is, yeah, it's not bad. The only problem is that my mum and dad both got about 75 points each, which then made me feel really bad about my life, specifically because my mum usually asks me who to bring in. So the fact that she actually got more than me was just pretty disastrous, if you ask me. But I had Russo, I had Shaw, and I had Knack. And I have had Knack since she came in. So I was an early adopter. And yeah, I'm sticking with her because she's doing bits for me.
See, I took Knack out. I put her in when she joined because I was thinking, obviously Alex Green was not here, so Knack's going to be getting loads of game time, which she did for a bit. But then Man City were just shipping goals so much. I was like, oh, I can't afford to do this. And yeah, when I played my clean slate this week, I took her out.
She got 9 points last week.
But never mind. I want to shout out as well to Blue Cheese FC, who I mentioned on the pod a few weeks ago because they are top of the Stattorino League. And they actually, so I gave them a shout out because they were top of the league. And I was sort of like, as much as I would love to win my own league, they are third in the world, which is really good. Fair enough. give you a shout out. They then messaged me that week to say, "Oh, thanks for the shout out. This is me, by the way. It's my team. I listened to your pod, and I wait until I've listened to your pod before I make my transfers." Which, as much as I appreciate that, that does then mean that you listen to my advice and then do better than me.
This is like a me and my mum situation right now. Like it doesn't feel good, does it?
No, but congrats. Well, Blue Cheese FC, they were actually first in the world after the last game week, dropped down to second this week, only 2 points off the top. So I am gunning for you for this season, because if the person that tops my league is the number one player in the world, happy days.
Yeah, fair play.
And I can maybe take an assist for giving some of the advice. Who knows?
Yeah, I feel like you should get some bonus points for that.
I mean, if anyone's going to give me the points, surely it's going to be someone from Fantasy WSL. Normally, at this point, I would start talking the listeners through, what the team of the week was and things like that. But seeing as you're here, would you like to do it?
I think I can. I mean, the team of the week was Devils FC. That was Charlotte Townsend, who played a triple captain on Turland, which is quite a. I mean, the whole team actually. You've really got to commend them. They had Williamson, Fox, Rord, as I said, the triple captain on Turland, and Ramirez and Asai, not to mention Cayman. So I can't really find any fault there. That's 109 points in total. Pretty bang on, to be honest.
I've just had a look at this team as well. There were only 2 points on the bench as well. So there's
like I really can't even say that's lucky. I think it's just a pretty sound team. So congratulations, Charlotte Townsend, wherever you are.
Well done, Charlotte and Devils FC. What about Visionaries this week?
So Visionaries, actually really interesting. So Gargo is still a visionary. There with still 0.48%. And you would have thought after I think I nearly brought her in and then didn't because of the Chelsea fixture. And I think probably a lot of people thought the same. So she's definitely one to watch if you want some extra points, because it doesn't seem like she's stopping scoring anytime soon. Gracie Pryor, obviously a visionary, because I think a lot of us didn't know who she was until this weekend. She got 15 points, I believe. And also Thibault, who plays for Leicester. I'm annoyed about this because I had her in my team for like the whole of the first half of the season, thinking, oh, I'm so smart. She's going to be a visionary every week. And then she never really did anything. So I took her out, and then she went and got like 11 points last game week. So, I think it was largely Leicester players actually this week. Leicester was the clever choice. We also had Gale at Palace, who got, I think, 8 points, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on any of this.
Yeah, Mila Gale obviously got that goal for Palace this weekend. Quite a good goal, actually, as well. Not many people have beaten Fallon Joyce this season. I think she's only conceded like 6 goals.
Yeah, exactly. So fair play.
She deserves her flowers for that. So there's a bit of a roundup of what happened in the Fantasy WSL world, but we're going to get on now to an actual deep dive in Fantasy WSL itself. So, Izzy, thank you for coming on the pod. You are welcome to come back on the pod, not necessarily just talk about Fantasy WSL, but while you're here for the first time, I thought it was only right we did, sort of a bit more of a deep dive. So can you just sort of talk the listeners through a little bit about how Fantasy WSL started? Like when did it start? Who started it? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I wasn't around actually when Fantasy WSL started. It was started by our co-founders Danny and Jimmy, who basically watched the Lionesses win the Euros, and they just thought, okay, let's get into this. They had no idea how to get into the WSL, and they'd been players of FPL for years. They know how FPL helps you kind of learn all about the league, and they thought, okay, let's make a game for the WSL that sort of we can play and learn about it. I should mention Jimmy is an extremely good software developer and coder. So he kind of set it all up. And Danny, her background had been in like marketing, social media, community management. So she knew all about that sort of the side that probably most of the listeners know about, which is sort of on Twitter, X, and Instagram, Discord, all those kind of things. So between the two of them, they cobbled up this app, which I believe sort of in its infancy only had about 100 users, probably because no one really knew about it. I should also mention that Danny and Jimmy are partners in life as well as on the app. So that's why they decided to make it together, because they literally live together. So yeah, they did that. And then just after the World Cup, so that would have been 2023, at the beginning of that season, I think it got like posted onto some kind of Facebook group somewhere, and it just launched out of nowhere, and it sort of went from 100 users to 10,000 in like 2 weeks or something crazy like that. And at that point they were like, oh, okay, and sort of just working to keep up with it. And yeah, thus Fantasy WSL was born.
Just out of two people wanting to go, oh, I want to learn a bit more about this and make my own game. I rate that a lot. I rate it as a really good way of doing it. And yeah, after playing, obviously, I've been playing it since the start of last season, which I think was sort of the main when it sort of took off. Um, and yeah, I've as I've mentioned on the pod before, I've been quite impressed with it because it doesn't feel like the sort of thing that only a few people have put together. It feels like um, a very sort of professional job that took loads of people and software developers and lots of big heads to put together, rather than just a small team that are doing really good work. How big actually is the team in total now?
So there's about 7 of us who work in some kind of capacity, some full time, some part time. Some are just volunteering our time, alongside other things. Um, yeah, we've purposely kept it quite small because it doesn't really need to be big. And I think it being a small team is helpful. I think it makes the game a lot easier to develop and be more responsive to like what people actually want. Um, so yeah, it's a small team, and we kind of, if we need someone new, it will be on a kind of needs basis where we, like I sort of said, we all come with a skill set, but in the very nature of these types of things, everyone's chipping in. And it's only when we're all chipping in and we realize, oh, we actually need someone who really knows about this stuff. And then we go and find someone. So yeah, it's a bit of a ragtag team, but it works for now.
Um, how did well? I guess the team in general and you. How did you get involved with it? Because like, does everyone know each other anyway? Sort of like outside of Fantasy WSL, or is it just like I guess like a normal recruitment process for a job?
It is actually none of those things. So yeah, Danny and Jimmy obviously knew each other, but none of us knew them or knew each other before we joined. So I actually, probably, it was actually the exact month that the season started last year. So it was September last year. I decided to quit my job, that I'd been working in for like 4 or 5 years, doing something completely different. I wanted to get into football, and I just thought, I was in a position to kind of take a risk. So I thought, I'd really like to kind of get into women's football as a job. So I kind of quit my job to make that happen. But I actually got into it in quite a funny way. I wanted to create a fantasy football game. I'm not a coder at all. I'm also really bad at social media, so I don't really know how I was planning to do this. But I had a real plan. I was going to make one. And I remember my friend sending me the fantasy WSL that we know today, and being like, "Oh, have you seen this? It's kind of blowing up." And I was so annoyed. I was like,
They're beating you
"Oh,
to it.
my idea." So yeah, after a bit of moaning and groaning, I actually just reached out to them, and I was like, "Look, I think I could probably bring skills and connections that I've had from my previous job, and hopefully help you guys out, because I think I started playing it as well and realized what they were doing was miles better than anything I could ever dream up. And so I just reached out and I said, can I help? I met the guys, and then sort of from there we just sort of started working together, and a year later here I am. And it's the same for a lot of the rest of the team. They came across Fantasy WSL through their own work, or just through their spare time playing it, and sort of came to Danny and Jimmy with a suggestion, and ended up kind of coming on and running some specific part of the team. So yeah, it's just a team of people who really, really love women's football, basically.
I like that. I think it's important for something like this, especially when it's quite new. Not just as in like Fantasy WSL is new, but in the women's game, obviously FPL has been around for years, but for the WSL, it's quite a new thing, and I think it's important that people, whether it's a big team or not, everyone working on it is passionate about it and wants to make it and wants to make it do well. I really like the idea of it. I think I'm a bit like you. As much as it won't surprise anyone, I'm pretty good with Excel and that sort of stuff, and I could probably make something very basic in Excel that did the same thing with all the points, but would look boring, and wouldn't be very intuitive and stuff. I think it's yeah, so that I'd look at and I was like, oh, yeah, these people are good at this. They're doing it better than I ever could. Um, yeah, and I love the fact that you just reached out. You said that it's obviously grown a lot. There was sort of 100 people or so at the time. It grew to like 10,000 in a few weeks. What was that, about 18 months ago? How many people are playing it this season?
So this season we have, I believe, 41,000 people, which is not bad. So if you're in the top 100, that's pretty damn good. Um, yeah, we finished last season, I think, with 32,000, maybe a little bit more. I can't quite remember. But yeah, so it's a big jump on last season, which is really, really good. But yeah, it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. I mean, you're nearly selling out the Emirates.
Ugh, I know, I know. Maybe we should start doing ticketing on the app or something.
Yeah.
Put
um,
stickers in the Emirates toilets.
yeah. Did you have like a target that you're trying to get to, or do you have a target you're trying to get to? Because obviously it's, I guess, something that, well, it sounds like two people made out of just their passion. They almost did it for themselves, and if people want to join along the ride, then great. But yeah, because it's growing so much and so quickly,
Yeah.
is there like a target to get to?
No, I think we're all really ambitious. And I think like last season was definitely sort of playing catch up because it was growing so quickly, and it was, really learning along the way. And like, it didn't start out as an app, for example, and then people wanted an app. So Jimmy built an app, and it was very much playing catch up. Obviously, over the summer, was the sort of first time we had to kind of take stock and then like think and plan a bit ahead as much as we could. So I think when we went into this season, we were like, let's have 100,000 people. Like, if everyone tells one friend, it's fine. Like, we're gonna do it. But no, like 41,000, it like is incredible. It is incredible. And you know, obviously there's bugs and there's things that kind of are a bit bumpy as with any app, but I think we'd rather have sort of like 41,000 really loyal fans at this stage of where we are, because we just want to make it the best game that it can be. And numbers don't really matter in terms of how many people playing, so long as we're growing and we're doing what the fans want, because ultimately like every decision we make is like, is this actually what people want? And that's sort of how we approach things. So yeah, I think we had an ambition, and we're just happy with where we are, and we just want to keep growing, and we don't want it to kind of grow stale, because obviously women's football is growing so rapidly. We want to keep pace with that.
Yeah, yeah. I think you probably will as well. I think obviously the sort of easy comparison to make is to FPL, and I know I think I saw, I can't remember if it was this season or last season, they hit 10 million for the first time. So they're obviously they're a long way ahead in terms of how long that's been a thing, but they're still growing. Um, Even though the Premier League doesn't necessarily grow with fans that much anymore, I don't think it's sort of probably got a bit more stale. WSL obviously is the other end of that spectrum, where it's obviously not as many people watch it and stuff at the moment, but it's growing really quickly, much sort of closer to being exponential than sort of the Premier League is, and it certainly seems like fantasy is growing at like a really good rate as well, which I love as well because then the more people that play it, I think the more people get into. Well, I think there's two ways you can really get into it because obviously it helps you or it helps people generally get a bit more invested in the games. So, like for me as an Arsenal fan, I'm not just caring about the Arsenal game or hoping Man City or Man United lose or something, but actually also thinking, oh, but I've also got, I don't know, Kirsty Hansen in my team, so I'm hoping that she scores in her game, and I've also got Mikata in my team, so I'm hoping that she gets at least assist or something like that, or that Palace do well and keep a clean sheet so she gets a bonus point or something like that. But I think it's really useful for helping people learn about players that aren't the headline makers because most people in the UK, well, maybe not most people, but a lot of football fans will know who Leah Williamson is, and they'll know who Beth Mead is, and they'll know who Lauren Hemp is, and people like that because they're big names and they hit the headlines and they do really well and score lots of goals. But they don't necessarily know that Kelly Gago is doing really well recently and that, she's going to be a visionary and doing really well for Everton, who are a sort of lower end of the league kind of team. So just having that extra bit on fantasy gets people a bit more involved with the whole league, not just the top end of it.
Yeah, exactly. And like for us, that's it. Like that's why we're like that's what guides our decisions. I think more than other things. So like when we think about how we do stuff, how we do our content, how we bring in new features or whatever, spotlighting those players, that's really important to us. And like we always talk about, or we did at least definitely last season, the beginning of this season, but Grace Clinton, she was just, our star girl for that because she started out, I think, on like 2% or something last season and in ownership in like in the game and then ended on like 48 and she's been the top selected player for the last few like probably since the beginning of this season. It might have changed now that she's sort of lost her starting spot, but she's exactly the example of what we try and do, and you can see it reflected because then she got her England start and then she scored some goals and suddenly everyone knows who Grace Clinton is, and what is happening on the game is like now reflecting, like is reflected and vice versa. It's all real life, and that's really really cool, and that is literally why we do it. So yeah, it's always great when we have people say like that's what they love about fantasy because yeah, and I knew a lot about the WSL before I was involved in this app, but it wasn't until I was involved that I realized how little I knew in comparison to what I know now, just being involved in the day to day running of it. Is like I can reel squads off the top of my head now, whereas before I'd say like I had an in depth knowledge of the top four and a sort of mediocre knowledge of everyone else.
Yeah, I was kind of before I started doing Stattorino, I don't know, a couple of years ago, whenever it was. I was kind of the same that I knew a lot about Arsenal just because I'd supported Arsenal men, so I keep an eye on Arsenal women. I could name most of the players at Chelsea and Man City and some of the Man United players and things like that. But other than that, I probably couldn't always tell you what teams were in the league each season. Whereas now, because I'm a bit of a nerd and I look through data all the time, I get really into it. But I do appreciate that not everyone is like that, and probably want more fun ways rather than just looking at numbers to get more into the WSL, and obviously looking at players from all the teams, not just the big four, makes a really big difference. Something I did want to ask is how you decide on like player prices, because this must be something that's I can see listeners won't be able to see this, but as soon as I said that, Izzy started laughing
The fear in my eyes.
because this must be really hard to do. I don't know. It's never going to be a really easy thing to do. Even like we've mentioned, FPL, who have been doing it for years, you always get every year there are players that are really expensive that get barely any points, and you get players that are really cheap that are really good. Whereas, if you are the team actually having to make those prices. How do you end up deciding on them, both at the start of the season and when people transfer in, but also how does it work with like prices changing throughout the year?
Yeah, so this is like where I guess in some ways it makes it easier in that like I say, all of our decisions are guided by how do we spotlight players, like how do we kind of last season we called it the lioness tax because it was basically all the people that were selected were just lionesses, and that was because it was the first season and it was new. And this season's a lot different because it kind of leveled out a bit more towards the end of last season, so that was a bit easier. But there's a very complex Excel formula, which is tried and tested. It's not perfect, but it basically, at the start of the season, we look at all the points, the fancy points from last season, so we can kind of see who the top performers are. So actually, the second, obviously Bunny Shaw was top last season, but it was actually Neve Charles who was second top overall this last season. So she came in very strong, and I think she was 8 maybe at the beginning of this season. So yeah, it's basically a mix of how well they performed last season points wise and how much ownership they have both as a player but also where their club falls. So basically, if they're a highly owned player or they play for Chelsea, they're probably going to be a lot higher than maybe someone who performs really well but at a lower club. So for us, that was the fairest way because it's trying to achieve that balance, and it's not going to be right, and it's going to take a lot of iterating. We do a similar thing through when transfers come in. Obviously, that's a bit harder because we don't have usually the points from sort of unless they transfer within the WSL. We don't have points from what they've done before. But like for example, when Knack came in this January, like we knew she obviously was going to City. We knew she was going to get a lot of game time because Greenwood was out. And just looking at her history, like she was like player of the year in Sweden where she played before. So and she scores like loads of goals, like an insane amount of goals for a defender. So we were sort of like, okay, well, she's got to come in at a bit of a premium. And if they don't perform, then they'll go down in price. So it will level out eventually. But hopefully, as we grow, we just learn more, and then we get to sort of iterate. But yeah, everyone has opinions on prices, and we're listening to all of them. Is what we'll say.
And it must be really hard to do as well because, like you say, if it was as much as there is a really complex Excel formula, which from what I do both day to day in my day job and just doing some of the stat stuff, um, I can only begin to imagine how complex it is. But also, there has to be, like you say, there has to be an element of not just the objective sort of analysis of it and how many points did they get last year or would they have got, etc. But also the fact that, well, they're a really good player, but they're actually they're not necessarily the best player, but they're actually going to be starting every week at Man City, so therefore they're going to be more expensive. Or taking the subjective almost context to say, yeah, well, last year they didn't get many points, but they were injured until March, so that's why. Whereas now this season coming, they're
Yeah,
probably going to get a lot more of that kind of thing.
exactly. And like someone like Leah Williamson, had she not had her ACL injury, she would have started the season on like a huge amount of points because she was so widely selected last season. She's so popular. Everyone wants to put her in her team. Technically on the formula, she would have been very low because she had like no points last season 'cause she didn't play. But we have to take that into account. And she ended up coming out at the price she did. But yeah, it's like, and also like it's not. I think people often, which is flattering, they compare us to FPL, which has been around for 12 years, and like you say, it has millions and millions of players and a huge team behind it. But women's football is different to men's football, and Fantasy WSL is not aiming to be like the FPL equivalent. It's obviously a fantasy game, and that has similarities, but we're not trying to be the same, and it comes the same with like points. Like points are not for us like and pricing. It's not all like sort of stats and intertwined like that. We're just trying to find like a way to kind of fairly judge everyone on a sort of level of like, okay, are they really popular? Are they generally quite good? And then do it that way rather than like get into the really nitty gritty. If we were really interested in the like really nitty gritty of points and everything, we do a lot more price changes and stuff midweek and make it a bit more strategic in that sense. But yeah, to your question about midweek price changes, again, that's entirely based on transfers. So whoever's transferred in loads will go up in price, and whoever's transferred out will go down, and it is just as simple as that.
I didn't realise that was literally why people go up and down. That does make sense, though.
Yeah, it's not actually based on their points at all, but it is usually reflective of who's done well. So
Makes sense. You said in the middle of that as well that although there's obviously a lot of comparisons between yourself and FPL, that's not necessarily what you're trying to become. And I think you can see that with some of the features that you've got, because there's quite a few features within FPL that, because it's a fantasy game, end up, if you, I don't know if there is one, but I assume there's other fantasy games for other leagues worldwide. There definitely is for stuff like NFL and NBA and things like that. And you do get stuff like a triple captain and things like that, which just come up in every fantasy game. But you've got features as well that are different. One that I really like, I was actually telling someone about this the other day that's not necessarily into WSL, but was really into FPL. And I was saying, in the Fantasy WSL, they've got Visionaries. And I was sort of explaining what a visionary is and the fact that, if it's a player that isn't selected by many people, but they then get a return, so more than just playing, basically, you get bonus points. And they were like, oh, that's such a good idea, because in FPL, you get the same players picked by, like, everyone's got Mo Salah. And at the start of the season, everyone had Cole Palmer. And last season, everyone had Erling Haaland. And then it sort of gets a bit boring because they're the players that bring in the most points. But actually, when you've got this visionaries aspect to it as well, you actually need to be good at it. You actually need to know a bit. Yeah, how important was it to bring in those sort of features like visionaries and things like that are a bit different?
yeah, I mean, like generally, we want it to be different, and we're quite creative as a team, I think. So we want like to do cool stuff and do different stuff. Like you say, like some stuff like triple captain, like it makes sense, and we like that about we like that about FPL, and we think it's good. But yeah, I think Visionary is probably, I think it's everyone's favorite. We're very proud of it, and actually, it was our head of content, Lauren's idea, and it just came out. We had like this big team meeting in the summer after the first season where we all just kind of processed everything that had happened, and we were just like, okay, what was good, what was bad, what do we need to change, whatever. And we just had this day long discussion, and at one point I think Lauren just said, oh, like it'd be so cool if we could do something that like rewards like players for picking someone who's got like say under 5% or whatever. And this is what as well Danny and Jimmy do really well, is Danny goes, yes, we can do this and this, and we can call it, and she'll give it a cool name and like really paint the picture. And then Jimmy can just go like, yeah, and then put it in the code, and then we can like work out, should it be 5%, should it be 2%, like what, because obviously it depends how many people are playing and things like that. And that is literally just how Visionary was born. And we just thought, okay, let's test it out. And yeah, I mean, I think it probably is most people's favorite feature because it is just like new. And we've had quite a few people who are generally FPL players like come to us and say, actually, this is really cool, like FPL should do this. I don't want FPL to steal it, it's ours. Just saying. But yeah, it is really cool, and I think it works. Like it works on two levels because, like you say, like you have to either be really good at it and like try and strategically pick some if that's your thing, and if being like playing the game, you're just playing the game for fun and you're not necessarily too bothered about the strategy. Like I think it's cool to put a player in your team and then they have the little sparkle saying they're like a visionary, and then you kind of know because you remember them more because you're like, oh yeah, this is like a person who's not necessarily super popular, but then you remember them, and on that basis it works as well. So it just started out as like, oh yeah, this would be cool if we could do this, but it's actually probably been one of our biggest successes, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's definitely my favorite thing. They're I like quite a lot of the features. I really like the wall as well. Obviously, that's unique. That's not something I've seen anywhere else. Where you get double points for it's double points, isn't it, for a clean sheet for your defenders, goalkeeper, and midfielders in a specific week. But also sort of the classic features like mini leagues, I think is really good and really nice to have. And yeah, just the fact that I love the fact the app is so easy to use. One thing that I actually think was really good to add in is the amount of sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like news pieces, um, which is obviously on the website. Um, I think that's sort of the best way to look at it personally, but you can get it all on the app as well, and it's a lot of it is linked into the cutback. Do you want to just talk about sort of your I guess partnership with the cutback?
Yeah, so we knew the team at the cutback, and we were kind of just chatting to them sort of about their plans when they were sort of getting ready to launch. And yeah, I think like we're really conscious as well. Like women's football's very much like I don't I don't like painting it of being like, oh yeah, everyone helps each other and it's really happy and fair. Like it's a business, but when people help each other in women's football, I think we all win at the stage that it's at. And like for us, it's like really important to promote people who are doing good stuff in the space. And I think when we were speaking to the team at the cutback, like what they're doing specifically is very much what we would like to do, but I think we probably don't have the time to do it right, and we don't have the team yet around us to do it right. Sort of that more analytical piece, and also I think a lot of people who play Fantasy WSL like that stuff, and they want to read that stuff because they're making informed choices about their team. So um, we thought we'd kind of just try it out and see how it works, and I think it's going really well because yeah, we get to kind of promote what they're doing, we get our like users to have some more stuff to read, and I think yeah, they're really enjoying it, and yeah, like I said, it's kind of a win-win. So yeah, I quite like that as well. I think we'd like to do more stuff like that in the future, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's quite a nice bit to have in. I saw the cutback when I think it's Flo Lloyd Hughes that sort of owns it. I think when that was sort of posted that it was coming out, and I sort of thought, oh, that's a really good. There's quite a few news outlets that type of stuff. I thought, I quite like her work, so I was like, this is another good outlet. And it seems like I know friend of the pod, Connor Roberts, is one of the writers for it as well. So when I saw the integration as well, I thought, oh, that's quite a good thing. Quite like it. In terms of sort of future proofing the Fantasy WSL, obviously you've got a really good, I guess, foundation of it now. It's sort of up and running. There's still, I'm sure, will always be a bit of testing and things like that as you're developing it. But what generally does the future hold? If you say anything you shouldn't do, I will cut it out. But is there anything coming out? Is there just general growth? Is there like any other features or anything like that? What can you share?
Well, currently, I can say that like we're constantly developing new features, even if we don't really know it yet. So a lot of the time, when we get people tweeting us saying the same thing over and over again, we're probably taking it into account and figuring out how we can put it in, either now or next season. So, you know, we love feedback. Please send it to us. If there's something you want to see, let us know. But for now, yeah, we're very, very busy. We just want to keep keep the app going to the best of its ability. If another game comes our way in the near future, then watch this space. But for now, we just want to keep the Fantasy WSL functioning well and just making it great for all the users that are using it, because obviously we're fairly near the end of the season, to be honest. It's going to go by in a breeze, and then we'll be planning for next season. And it's a big year for women's football as well. We've got the Euros, so sky's the limit, really.
Yeah, I think after, I guess the Euros and the World Cup, both for England, that was, I guess, where women's football exploded a bit in the UK. A lot of people got into it. I certainly started paying a lot more attention to it. I always followed it probably more from afar, I guess, like I mentioned earlier. But now I can name probably 95% of the players in the league and stuff like that. And many people have got a lot more into it. For example, you're now up to 40 something thousand people playing the game, which is fantastic. And yeah, hopefully it just goes from strength to strength. Pardon me. And we can obviously we'll keep mentioning it on Decoding the WSL as well. It's, I think, because I love games generally. I've grown up playing a lot of video games. I've been playing Fantasy WSL for years, Fantasy WSL FPL for years. So when Fantasy WSL came out, I was really excited for it, and obviously started my own mini league and things like that on it, as well as getting my own team. But yeah, I was really excited to get this sort of partnership that we've now got, where we talk about it on the pod every week. And obviously I got to be the scout last week.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And also, I'd like to say, I think I'm 54th in the Stattorino League. So, I'm getting there.
You're getting there. I think there's 200 and something in the Stattorino League, so you're well above halfway.
I'm 59, but, same difference. Yeah, no, I'm happy with that, I am happy with that.
I'm still, I dropped out, and I'm still not back in the top 10 in my own mini league yet. But never mind.
You're just lifting other people up. It's fine.
I'm just making other people feel better. That's all it is.
Exactly.
But yeah, thank you very much, Izzy, for coming on today. Really appreciate you giving up your time this evening to talk not just all things WSL, but all things Fantasy WSL as well. You're more than welcome to come back on the pod.
Thank you for having me. I probably will, because I could chat about this till the cows come home. So
love to see it. But yeah, thank you, and thank you, listener, for tuning in to Decoding the WSL. If you enjoyed today's episode, do make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And it does help if you can give a 5-star review, because it does go a long way with the algorithms and helping everyone find the show. You can follow at Decoding the WSL on Instagram, and obviously you can follow me for even more stats and insights and that kind of stuff at Stattorino on X. I'm on TikTok now, I'm a bit more active on there, as well as Instagram and Blue Sky. Thank you again, Izzy, for coming on. Thank you again, listener, for joining us. And I will speak to you at the next one.